Chiefs Kingdom, welcome into another episode of the Chiefs Report by Chat Sports. My name is Jackson Durham, and today we are breaking down the good news out of Week 17 for the Kansas City Chiefs. Obviously, we lost to the Denver Broncos on Christmas Day. That was the last time we talked, but that's a little bit in the rear view, and some other things went in our direction that made Week 17 overall good news, in my opinion. After we get through that, I'm going to give you guys our rooting guide for Week 18. Not our usual rooting guide. Usually we were talking playoffs. Now we're talking draft picks. So we're going to talk about who we need to win and lose for our draft pick to get as good as it can be. And then, staying with the draft theme, we're going to talk about some first-round draft targets that the Kansas City Chiefs could go after. However, before we get into all that, I need your guys' help. If you want the Chiefs, and the Chiefs need your guys' help too, if I'm going to be completely honest, if you want the Chiefs to nail the 2026 offseason, the draft, free agency, everything we're going to get into when we do our perfect offseason video later this year, I need you to like this video. The Chiefs need you to like this video. So get down there and smash that thumbs up button real quick for me. And let's go ahead and get into things. First on the agenda, the good news. I'm like Professor Farnsworth from Futurama right now. Good news, everybody. It's a terrible, terrible impression. But we're going to talk about what happened in Week 17 that was ultimately good news for Kansas City. A couple games went in our direction, and when you combine that with the fact that we lost to the Broncos, our pick got a lot better this week, gang. Let's get into it here. Week 17 results. The Saints, they beat the Titans, which moves them to 6-10 on the season. They're currently sitting just ahead of us in the draft order. Also, the Dolphins came through for us. They beat the Buccaneers, 20-17. And lastly, our guys in Cincinnati, the Bengals, they got it done. Usually not our friends, but they delivered for us this time with a win over the Cardinals, 37-14. So what does all of that mean? Let's take a look at the draft order as it stands. So obviously you've got the top 6 or 7 really picks. Those guys are all at 4-12. They might bounce around a little bit. We can't break into that territory. We don't have enough losses to stack up to get up there, and obviously we're already at 6 wins. So our number one landing spot is going to be at that 8 seed, ahead of the Saints. But we lose the tiebreaker right now because of strength of schedule. So when you have tiebreakers in the draft, it comes down to who had the weaker strength of schedule, with the higher pick ultimately going to the team that played the easier schedule and was still worse. So that's why we beat the Bengals in the tiebreaker, but we currently lose it to the Saints. One more thing to keep an eye on. We're filming this in Week 17 on Monday, so most of Week 17 is over, but we still haven't seen the result of Monday Night Football. So if you're watching this on Tuesday, this isn't as relevant. You already know what happened. Don't spoil for the rest of us. But Falcons versus Rams on Monday Night Football tonight. If the Falcons lose, their pick, which is ironically held by the Rams, will move to 9th, and they will leapfrog the Chiefs, knocking us down to 10th. So if that result goes in Atlanta's direction, tomorrow morning we will actually be sitting 10th in the draft order. And obviously, if that result goes in LA's direction, we'll be sitting 10th in the draft order. Therefore, we want Atlanta to win tonight. We are Falcons fans tonight in their game against the LA Rams. Tough one. We've had to root for a lot of teams that are unlikely to win at times this season. So we're backs to the wall in that situation once again. But our Week 18 rooting guide is a little bit more possible, in my opinion. The number one thing that is unlikely to happen, the Chiefs losing to the Raiders. As much as this would be the best thing for us draft pick-wise, is it embarrassing that we would lose to the worst team in football, bar none? Absolutely. But I think we could all deal with short-term embarrassment for a better draft pick. At least I could at this point in the season. I mean, we're starting our third-string quarterback. It wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to lose to the Raiders. Don't really think the Raiders have it in them, though, at the end of the day. But if that does happen, and the Saints beat the Falcons, and both finish at 7-10. This is contingent on the Falcons winning on Monday Night Football, by the way, so that both of those teams would finish 7-10. That would lock in the 8th overall pick for us. Those two outcomes, automatically, you are picking 8th. If Kansas City wins, we need the Bengals and the Dolphins to win, plus the Saints beating the Falcons. That would also lock in the 8th overall pick. So 2 ways you could do it, but either way, you need Saints to beat the Falcons, Bengals to win and Dolphins to win if you win. So either way, the number one most important one is Saints versus Falcons, regardless of what we do. But all of that being said, if all of those results go in our direction, the Chiefs can get as high as the 8th overall pick. Huge. Huge for Kansas City. And genuinely unbelievable. Who would have thunk at the beginning of the season that A, this is what we would be discussing in December, and B, that the Chiefs would be drafting 8th, potentially. Top 10 pick for Kansas City, and we didn't even have to trade for it. It's not the way we wanted this season to go. Not at all. But here we are, and we're going to talk about how we can get out of this situation and to a much better path next season with some potential first-round draft targets. But before we do that, I've got to give a shout-out to the sponsor of today's episode, and that is Prize Picks. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Whether you're starting a new routine or making player picks for the first time, trying something new can be hard. But in life and on Prize Picks, it always feels good to be right. With high-pressure playoff matchups every weekend and elite hoops action almost every night, the action never stops, and Prize Picks lets you take control. Prize Picks also now has early payouts, so if your player gets off to a hot start, you now have the option to cash out those winnings before the game even finishes, which is super, super sweet. Let's talk about my lineup tonight for Monday Night Football. I'm going with the more on Puka Nacua pretty much everything, guys. A lot of demon picks in this lineup. A lot of demon picks, a lot of Puka Nacua. And then we're also taking the more on Kyle Pitts' receiving yards as well. So we need this game to essentially be a shootout. We need a lot of passing yards, but that would be a huge one for us. And look, I think you guys should tell me on this one, but if you want to fade me on it, whatever you do, do it at Prize Picks because Prize Picks puts their users first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. They accept most major payment methods, making deposits into your account quick and easy this sports season. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Indeed it is. And it would be right of the Kansas City Chiefs to pick any of the three guys we're going to talk about today in our draft targets section. Number one, producer Ponzi's favorite by a country mile of the three guys we're going to talk about today. Big Red Raider fan over there. David Bailey. Bailey's fun. He really is. A lot of you guys talked about Bailey, brought him up in the comments when we did our first-round draft targets video a little while ago. And understandably so. Because we focused on offense in that one. So this time we're kind of flipping sides. We're going to some defensive targets. And Bailey might be my number one all along the defensive line. He's fantastic, guys. Led the Power 4 in sacks in 2025 with 13.5. He's just behind a Western Michigan player for total lead in the entire FBS. And I think he could be the cure-all for the Chiefs' pass rushing woes, which I have hit on over and over and over again this season. I know our subscribers, you're tired of hearing about it, but I got to say it again. We need to improve in this area. 3rd in blitz rate this season, 21st in sacks, and 19th in pressure rate. Unacceptable. Unacceptable statistics, not getting enough production from our front seven as a pass rushing unit. Bailey could take you to the next level here. Let's talk about his strengths. He's a fantastic athlete. The get off with him is extremely, extremely explosive. That's maybe his number one trait overall, is just the kind of athlete that David Bailey is, and the speed to power combination with him overall. Very, very nice. Excellent bend at his size as well. That is another huge part of his athleticism, but the way he can get low, he can get around offensive tackles at that size, very, very impressive. He's 6'3". Number 3, extremely active hands, and he uses them very well. If you're not familiar with what I mean by that, when you think about defensive line play, it's kind of a cliche. You beat the hands, you beat the man. And that is exactly what David Bailey is skilled in. He uses his hands to deflect first punches, get him that early advantage on offensive tackles. And when you combine that with his highly explosive get-off, he's very tough to stop. Plus, just an arsenal of rush moves. He's not just winning with athleticism out there, guys. He's got a ton of different moves he can go to, whether it's the rip, the ghost, the spin. He can beat you a number of different ways. Couple concerns with David Bailey, though. Not everything positive. Number 1, he's undersized. And this is the thing that, as you're looking at the Chiefs and what Steve Spagnuolo likes to do, this is a huge concern. I worry that Spagnuolo would not view David Bailey as a true edge defender. I think he's not going to be alone in that at the NFL level. There's going to be other guys that have concerns about his ability to set the edge due to his size and due to his overall lack of power. I talked about the speed to power combination there, but there's definitely concerns in run defense due to that lack of power. It's a lower body issue. He just doesn't have the mass in his lower legs at this point. I think it's correctable, but it's probably going to turn him into a situational pass rusher early on in his career. And you just have to ask the question of, do you want to spend a potentially top 10 draft pick on a guy who may spend the first 2 years of his career as a highly situational pass rusher? Not ideal. Far, far, far from ideal. But let's talk about another edge target. Number 2 on our draft targets video today, Rueben Bain. Rueben Bain is, in a lot of people's eyes, the number 1 edge in the entire class, the number 1 defensive lineman in the entire class, maybe I should say. First in ACC in pressures with 66 this year. This guy got after people at Miami this season. And when we talk about the size issues that you see with David Bailey as we get into his strengths, that is not an issue for Rueben Bain at all. He is a much more natural fit for Spags' scheme at edge or potentially even at defensive tackle. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. But size-wise, you have no concerns about Bain in the same way you do Bailey. And what they do have in common, though, super deep bag for Bain as well. Another guy who does have elite athleticism, does have elite speed power, but doesn't necessarily win using just that. It's a huge part of how he wins, but the arsenal of moves, the rip, the spin, fantastic stuff. His swim move is awesome. Great speed to power combo as well. Just kind of mentioned it. But when you combine that, these two things, him and Bailey both excel in this way. Very, very similar outside of the size difference. But also, the number one thing he has over Bailey, other than size, super capable in run defense. Not similar to Bailey in that way where you do worry about, can Bailey truly set the edge as a run defender at the NFL level? You don't have those kind of concerns for Rueben Bain based off his size. You do kind of have him technique-wise. As we get into his concerns, you could correct this aspect of his game, in my opinion, but he is occasionally prone to overrunning his lanes in run defense, whether it's against mobile quarterbacks or against just faster running backs. He's often trying to get very quick into the backfield, and he will leave that space, and he gets so upfield on his rushes. Sometimes offensive tackles, better offensive tackles, and NFL offensive tackles are going to do this to him early on. They will redirect him. They will use that burst off the line against him. If you've ever watched Jared Verse with the Rams, this happens to him all the time. He gets led way, way, way too deep, and he leaves space for mobile quarterbacks to escape in pass rushing. These two concerns for him against the run are probably my biggest concerns with Bain as far as technique is concerned, but they're highly fixable. The two concerns that are not fixable with Bain, his arm length. Or number one really concern with him is arm length and his height, which we'll talk about in a minute as well. The arms are the biggest thing. 30 and 3/4 inch arms. Obviously, that's long for your average guy. It is incredibly short for an NFL edge defender. I don't believe that there has ever been an edge defender in the entire history of the NFL with shorter than 31-inch arms who has recorded a 10-sack or more season. So it just kind of goes to show arm length, obviously, when you think about your ability to reach around, huge part of what makes a great edge defender. And number two, also kind of contributing to that, he's just compact overall. At 6'2", 270, you do think maybe, and a lot of NFL teams apparently have this opinion of him, that he may be best kicking inside, moving to defensive tackle. I wouldn't mind the Chiefs drafting him to play that role, however. It is a concern because I think we more need an edge defender, but he has just as much value from the interior. He'd be a phenomenal interior pass rusher, but definitely something to think about. So, who do you like more? Between the two guys, we just broke down their strengths, their weaknesses, gave you a little bit of information about each of them. Are you rolling with Rueben Bain from Miami? Type RB for me. Are you rolling with the guy who is still keeping his season rolling? He's actually going to play this week. David Bailey. Type DB in the comments. RB or DB, let me know in the comments. And speaking of DBs, Kind of funny how this worked out. Didn't even think about that. Mansoor Delane is going to round out our video today. Our final draft target being a corner, may be a bit of a surprise to some of you, but there's something I want you to think about. Right now, I'm going to throw something your way, and I'm interested to see how you guys react. What if we traded Trent McDuffie this offseason? What if we did that? How would you feel? We're going to talk about that a lot more later this week. It's going to be something that I think is a persistent narrative around the Kansas City Chiefs, but I want you to keep it in the back of your mind that trading Trent McDuffie may be a reality for Kansas City. And if you do that, you might want to address corner. And like I said, that's going to be covered in our next episode later this week. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. Because trust me, we're going to go in depth with this, exactly why I think it is highly possible that Kansas City does consider trading Trent McDuffie. And I'm going to give you my opinion on whether or not I think the Chiefs should make this move. But that's coming in our next episode, so make sure you hit that subscribe button. Time being, though, let's talk about Mansoor Delane. He is an excellent man and zone cover corner. I think he's CB1 in this entire draft. Gerard McCoy maybe would have taken that spot for me, but the injury concerns are too big for him. But Delane, incredibly versatile in his coverage ability. Great man cover corner, great zone cover corner, really, really strong. Willing and able tackler as well. This is sometimes one of the concerns that I think gets underrated with shutdown corners of his caliber is this guy ready to come down and play in run defense, or is he a little scared? And especially at his size, which we're going to talk about his size a little bit later, at 187 pounds, that becomes a big issue with some of these guys. They don't want to hit. Delane loves to hit. He thrives on it. And what he also thrives on is playing the ball. Ball hawk, 11 pass breakups. In 2025, he had 2 picks. He has, throughout his career, going all the way back to his time at Virginia Tech, where he spent 3 years, been a fantastic corner who is always looking to make plays on the ball. And lastly, just kind of hinted at it, he's super experienced, guys. 44 games played makes him one of the most experienced corners in all of college football at the Power 4 level, and it absolutely shows in the way he's played. He's been there. He's done that. Concerns with him, though. We are a zone primary team. He is a primary man corner. Like I said, he's got excellent skills in both man and zone, but if you want the most out of Mansoor Delane, he's best fit into a man scheme, which does kind of become a concern. Do I think he could switch and become more of a zone corner? Absolutely. I think he's got traits to do that, but it's something to think about. And number 2, we just talked about it with his tackling, which he's still very willing in, but he's got an undersized frame at 187 pounds. Are you as willing to come up and hit Derrick Henry? There's no Derrick Henrys running around at the college level. Derrick Henry will be running around on NFL fields with Mansoor Delane. Could be a different story. And lastly, as much as he is a ball hawk, he's greedy at times. He wants to make plays on the ball. He wants to get interceptions, as every corner does. But at times he lets that lead him into jumping routes, trying to make plays that aren't there for him and leaving himself exposed on the back end. Giving up big plays that way. So those are the 3 big concerns with Delane. Let's round out with all 3 of our draft targets one more time here. David Bailey, leader in sacks in the Power 4 this year, 13.5 at Texas Tech. Little bit undersized, leads to concerns that Spags might shift him to inside linebacker. A little bit of Josh Uche flashbacks here, but overall, fantastic player. Rueben Bain, another edge defender or defensive lineman, truly. Concerns that he may have to kick inside to defensive tackle, but even if he does, phenomenal player who's going to be able to get after the passer from either spot along the defensive line. And lastly, Mansoor Delane, undersized, but highly, highly technical and highly experienced shutdown corner out of LSU. Let me know in the comments, which of these 3 guys are you going with if you are making the first overall pick for the Kansas City Chiefs? And that's going to do it for today's episode. Appreciate you guys spending your time with us. I've been Jackson Durham. You've been watching the Chiefs Report by Chat Sports, and we will see you guys next time.